And so one of the arguments that we made about why it didn't moot out our lawsuit was that the public would have no way of knowing whether or not the FISA court reapproved the program every 90 days and whether or not, therefore, they were wiretapping again outside the FISA jurisdiction. And sure enough, after the first 90 days, while the case sits up there twice now, and the timing is confirmation about what's up, the government has come into the Court of Appeals and filed additional secret evidence. We have no idea what the secret evidence says, but we assume that what they're doing is informing the Court of Appeals, which is still in the middle of deciding the case, about the status of the program and whether or not it's under the FISA court jurisdiction still. And we have gone in and repeatedly filed motions with the Court of Appeals to try to unseal to some extent those documents. Because it's just absurd, again, that the government can, go out, hold a big press conference, say, everything's okay, don't worry, you're not being wiretapped without a warrant anymore, and then just on its own terms decide whether it's going to continue to update us on the status of that program. And we don't know. We hope that when the court issues its decision on the legality of the program, that it will also rule on our motions to unseal in part this information about whether, in fact, the FISA court is still reviewing these national security wiretaps. In closing, I just want to say I'm afraid I'm not going to end on quite as positive of a note as David, although I do agree that there have been some successes. But there also been some very disturbing losses, including with respect to the illegal rendition program. And also I want to just end by saying that I have been, frankly, quite disappointed so far in Congress and in the role that Congress has not played since the Democrats took control not even just in reversing some of these bad policies, but even in exposing them to a little bit more sunlight. It just hasn't happened. It was something that we all pushed for, and there really have not been significant hearings to explore in greater detail just what's going on with some of these programs, whether it's illegal rendition or NSA spying. And I think we all need to keep the pressure up to make it clear that these abuses still matter very much to us. And along those lines, I just want to mention one event that's upcoming. There are a number of different organizations, including Amnesty USA and the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and the National Religious Campaign Against Torture and the ACLU, who have come together to plan what they're calling a Day of Action to Restore Law and Justice. And it's on June 26th, and it's going to be a lobby day in Congress where many, many people will come from all over the country to lobby Congress to fix some of these problems that have been with us for all too long. So I encourage all of you to participate. And I think there may be flyers outside about it. If there aren't, there's information at juneaction.org. So I encourage you all to take part in that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg. I'm really grateful to the World Affairs Council for sponsoring this event. I think it's great to have a chance to talk about these issues. The chapter that I wrote for the book focused on government surveillance, and in that area there have been two distinct developments since 9/11. The first has been an increase in law enforcement powers to intrude on privacy by wiretapping, by email surveillance, by secret searches, and especially by greatly expanded access to documents and records that previously had been considered private. The second development has been greatly reduced oversight of the way that these powers are used. So the first change, the greater search and surveillance powers, was very predictable, and in my view, some of it is justifiable, at least to a considerable extent. The second change, the reduced oversight, has gotten much less attention, but it may be even more important. And reduced oversight is not justifiable. It's almost incomprehensible that just at the time when we're enlarging government powers, so reducing and in some cases completely eliminating oversight and accountability for the way that these very powerful weapons are being used. But the administration has had a great deal of success convincing the public that accountability is a bothersome nuisance. And much of the public, I think, is now convinced that oversight by the courts or by Congress, or even oversight by select congressional committees, will somehow make counterterrorism powers ineffective. The easy way to counter that view is simply to point out some of the catastrophic errors of judgment and all the mismanagement that's resulted from the current administration's extreme allergy to any form of oversight or transparency. But I think the basic problem here really goes beyond any one administration, and it's really going to be with us long after the Bush administration leaves office. Every time in our history that oversight has been relaxed, every time, without exception, we've learned, sometimes we've learned long after the fact, but every time we've learned that legitimate powers have been overextended and misused when there have not been oversight mechanisms in place. One very prominent example goes back to the 1970s and the hearings of the Church Committee on FBI surveillance practices from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And the Church Committee documented in great detail how the FBI had lost all sense of proportion, all sense of restraint. The FBI was literally drowning itself in hundreds of thousands of unnecessary domestic intelligence files. And that